For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael. Welcome to the show.
Morning. Thanks very much indeed. Well, it's nice to be here. Yes, as far as the markets are concerned, a fairly mixed picture as usual. But Asia Pacific. But the big news is China, which has certainly bounced back from the COVID lockdown. Its first quarter GDP beat expectations, up 4.5%. It's expected to be up about 4%. Retail sales up 10.6%. So certainly coming back to life again. Also, what they're thinking about there is EVs, electric vehicles. Now, one company says it's not going to take part in price cuts like Tesla. Other companies are saying that premium sales are where it's expected. Things will actually reach a high in China as well. This is electric vehicles doing extremely well there. There are some indications. I'm going to take you to the rest of India, of Asia Pacific, and look at where the central banks are going. There are some indications that some of those central banks have probably reached the peak of interest rate rises. You're talking about South Korea, Australia, India. India held at 6.5%, Australia held 2%, and South Korea's held twice. So it could be that those kind of markets are actually at the peak of their inflation and thus in interest rate rises. I'm going to take you to Alphabet shares now. They dipped this morning because it's rumored that Samsung phones may use Microsoft's Bing search rather than Google search. And the Google search CEO is also saying, or Google CEO is also saying that AI will impact every product of every producer, and how is it going to be regulated? This is one of the problems which I think industry around the world will probably have to face, including ours. I mean, we were talking with the doctor about the imposition of fake news, for example. How on earth are we going to distinguish that when AI can produce something that is almost indistinguishable from human content? Asia Pacific as a region will probably overtake the United States and the European Union. That's according to Morgan Stanley, seeing enormous growth there. It's all about domestic demand, particularly China. We talked about the rebound there. And also India, Indonesia, and Japan heading forth as far as consumer demand is concerned, picking up through later this year. That's according to Morgan Stanley. Let's take you to the United States and a recap of what happened there. The Dow up about 100 points in regular trade yesterday. It's digesting the various updates to the banking sector results, including Charles Schwab and State Street. Today it's the turn of Johnson & Johnson, Goldman Sachs and Bank of America, and investors are actually looking at these banking stocks to work out how much the collapse of those various regional banks has affected the main banks, and they're still searching around for clues as far as concerned. Some gloom from Scandinavia, from Sweden. It's still awaiting its NATO membership, but it's looking as though the country will probably fall into recession. It's not growing as well as expected. It's suffering from high inflation. It's suffering from a lot of people with a huge cost of living problem as well, struggling to make ends meet. So again, what is always seen as a relatively populous and profitable state is now not, according to it. Going to take you to European farmers. The wishes of the EU and the EC that agriculture will become greener by 2025. And you're talking about rewilding, you're talking about doubling organic production, halving pesticides and so on. I mean, what the farmers are saying is that would be a big ask under normal circumstances, not with the problems that have been highlighted by the Russian invasion of Ukraine and so on, and how that's affected the food markets around the world. Very, very skeptical about whether those farmers will actually do it, and how will, for example, the EU and the EC manage to meet that target of 2050, and how will they police it as well? That's a big, big question. President Macron has been on nationwide television to the French. He's trying to shift the protest that they're having about pension age going from 62 to 60, or retirement age rather, going from 62 to 64, and then a pension beyond that, by saying that what his party is going to do is better law and order, increase education and health, start a general a general recreation of the French Republic. How we'll do that, don't know, but that's what he's trying to do at the moment. UK workers, we talked about AI, artificial intelligence, briefly earlier on. The unions organisation, the TUC, is warning workers that they stand to be threatened, certainly as far as tech jobs are concerned, in terms of hiring, pay, promotion. Chat GPT can, as I say earlier on, can more or less replace what looks like human activity and human quotes, and without one being able to tell the difference between the two. So tech in the workplace is going to be under threat, and certainly workers' jobs are too. That's got some years to come, but it still shows the overall influence of AI. And as far as the United Kingdom is concerned and the wave of strikes, the Prime Minister thinks that the various splits within the unions, particularly, this has nothing to do with the junior doctors, but this is to do with the nurses and so on. Nurses get a load of respect, obviously, and a lot of support from the UK public as well. He thinks those splits and unions might get them to accept this 5% increase. Junior doctors are still worlds apart from anything, 35% increase. And I think what's gradually dawning on the British people is that this is Gen Z or Generation Z taking pride in a strike which threatens to blow up society. I mean, that's what they're feeling right now. As far as oil's concerned, really suffering. I think it's going to be a volatile, a stronger dollar. I don't think a dollar is particularly going to last very strong for a long time, particularly if recession starts to bite in the United States. So that'll be a whole other thing for oil and, of course, commentators like us to come to terms with. And also gold, well, it's still within glimpses of a record high, but it may take a little time to reach there, given the volatility of the general markets. That's the global view this morning.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. I want to look at artificial intelligence this morning, AI. And rightly said, some bosses have raised concerns around what they call this race for AI that's become a growing concern. Only recently, Chinese technological giant Alibaba has also said that they are developing their own version of ChatGPT called Tongyi Quanwen. And this is amidst the fact that recently Goldman Sachs, in a recent report, had said that AI could potentially replace 300 million jobs. In the age where we're trying to create jobs and reduce the rate of unemployment, is that not something to look at? Should government or perhaps more figures come out to speak about this and there be regulations around that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know where the 300 million comes from. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it could be anybody's guess, couldn't it? But it does seem as though repetitive technical jobs will probably be taken over by artificial intelligence. The damaging thing, I think, is really about one's perception of where you think the world is going. Because if it's almost indistinguishable from human input, at least you can trace human input slightly. Artificial intelligence, you probably can't. Now, there's one thing about it taking over the repetitive work, but taking over things like fake news or taking over news and providing fake news, and we could be subject to it right now. Is more news being pumped in, more money being pumped into news organizations to make sure they don't fall for fake news? I simply don't know. I suspect that the business of news and the business of how we see the world is going to be very, very expensive indeed. All to do with education and artificial intelligence. Will have to be regulated. How they're doing it, I think, is probably entertaining a few minds right now. But we're not seeing many results from it. Again, the so-called guardrails of artificial intelligence still have to be drawn up.
Okay, Michael, I was going to ask you about the situation in Sweden, but let me start with France. When you look at what has happened with Macron at the moment, you look at the demography of France. Over the last 10 years, the average age has increased from 40 to 42.2 years. That means that the number of older people are increasing. And it would make sense that he should increase the number of years that you get into active service. Do you think that the people in France are doing the right thing by protesting this rather than supporting? And the second question will be,
I'm not, and it depends what you mean by right thing, doesn't it? I mean, the French, as I've said before on this program, and I can speak with personal experience about this. You get the French do so at lunchtime, forget it. The weekend, forget it. They pay a lot of money into the state, and they expect the state to support them. And Macron has actually overridden Parliament, as you know. And what he said is this is going to happen. What he's been trying to do is divert attention from it by talking about improving the rest of society as well. But I think this is absolutely fundamental to the way in which French workforce and French society will actually work, and they do not like it. They don't like the fact that they're being asked to remain at work longer because they simply don't see that as part of the social contract. Now, the interesting question is, would therefore Macron form the sixth republic? There's been a fifth republic for quite a few years, ever since General de Gaulle after the Second World War. Would he start a sixth republic and bring in all these kind of changes? I suspect he probably dare not. There will be populists around who will stake his claim to presidency fairly quickly. I think France is sclerotic. It's bound by big unions, and it's not a question of what's right or wrong. It's a question of whether the economy can actually bear it or not. I suspect with a much more expensive older population, it can't. That is the case that he has been trying to put to the French people. So far, they don't care.
Well, quick asides, Michael. I mean, in France, the 9-member Constitutional Council has already, passed that proposal into law. And so the question is whether the unions can force Macron to change his mind. And will he? I hope. I guess maybe he wouldn't. Now that it is law, effectively. And then in the UK, yesterday, Prime Minister Sunak was talking about numeracy, mathematics, getting the population, to embrace maths and English up to the age of 18. But he seems not to have worked out the maths very well on the home front. Now that the ethics watchdog is after him. And then, of course, unions warning about artificial intelligence, which you talked about. You'll recall I once raised a question not too long ago on this program about the possibility of even presenters, as we have seen in Kuwait, becoming artificial intelligence robots. But I wanted to ask you about China. China has done much better than expected, 4.5%. Everybody says, oh, okay, now that China has moved on, is doing very well. Factory output is up by about 3.9%. And also, retail sales up by 10.6%. But are there headwinds? Because IMF is saying, look, there will be slow growth. So will China be able to override that and not be affected by it? Even if the same IMF is saying that in the next 5 years, China will contribute more to global economic growth. And the US will be third. China will be followed by India, they say.
Yeah, so what is your overall question?
No, my question is about China. Are there headwinds? Because out of this, report, people are saying, oh, China will even do better in the second quarter. But there are headwinds, aren't there?
I think there are considerable headwinds as far as China is concerned, and they're not just the immediate ones. I think that they suffer from, as I've often said before, they suffer from an acute demographic problem. They still suffer from a centralized business model, which doesn't, as far as I can see, doesn't necessarily bring in the countryside and the rest of workers from the countryside and the rest. I mean, I quote the figures to you. You've seen the figures too. Whether these are true or not, I simply don't know. I mean, that's the problem. What we don't know, we don't know where China is standing as far as geopolitics is concerned. What we do know about it is that it clearly doesn't suit them to have a Taiwan next to them, which is clearly doing quite well under a democracy, under a capitalist democracy, when of course it isn't one itself. So it doesn't want to see that. So where that's going, I don't know. What is its support for Russia? And is it going to suffer from more trade tariffs from the United States and indeed Europe, given its support for Russia? Or indeed is it not supporting Russia? How do we know? We hear, as you would say, the showboating from the various leaders, but what we don't know is the hard facts of it. All I do know is, and I would preface everything about China on this, is that they clearly have an older workforce, they have more people retiring, and they don't necessarily know what to do. That is a big, big challenge for any socialist society like China.
Well, thank you very much, Michael Wilson. Now, for business updates across the African continent, Rotus Odiri joins us.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Kay Akintunmi. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning to all our viewers. We begin with the agriculture sector. Animal feed, in particular, in focus. We had a report on a summit that was held not too long ago. Let's take a listen to that.
Security and nutrition security for humans. Equally, we'll have to do the same for the animals, because they are what we consume. And if we don't feed them well, they get sick, and we consume, we might end up getting sick. And it's very important that we go and look for alternative sources of feed, not just the usual grass. So we have to innovate. This is age of technology. We have to think of what other areas can we look at to see what we can come up with that is palatable to the animals, that is also safe, that is nutritious, that is also healthy to the humans when we consume through the animals.
We'll be talking about issues around how we can develop the frameworks around implementing that document. So it is not just a feed summit, it's tailored towards further reviewing an animal feed policy to include areas we left out, and also make sure that gender perspectives come on it, and conservation is also part and parcel of it.
Right now we produce about 25% of what our demand is. So we need to not only meet our demand, we also need to meet the demand of the growing population. So it's critical that we sit down and have this conversation, especially as a new administration is coming in. It's important that we start to set the agenda for the new administration.
So, I don't know, this is a point I've been trying to drive home every time we look at business in Nigeria. When an administration is leaving, you've got to look at what they've done over their tenure to see whether or not the country as a whole, using different sectors of the economy, is better off than when they came in. We did this with paper mills, when we looked at the 1.6 trillion naira in paper that has been imported in Nigeria over the last 5 years. We've done this in manufacturing. We've done this in a number of sectors. So now, here's that discussion on animal feed. These costs are still high. 70% of, as animal feed as a percentage of our overall agricultural operations, particularly in poultry, aquaculture, and other livestock operations, account for 70%. You heard from Minister Abubakar, who just came, of course, they fired the last Minister of Agriculture, and he came in September 2021. But the costs are still very, very high. Agriculture GDP, I think, was 2.05% in the fourth quarter of last year. Overall, it was 3%. You have 4 subsectors in agriculture. You've got livestock, you've got forestry, you've got fish, and you've got crop production. Crop production accounts for over 95% of the 4 subsectors in agriculture. So the point here is that despite the amount of time and promises that have been made, there is still no significant improvement in. And look, listen, when it comes to animal feed, it's like making food anywhere else. What do you need? It's power more than anything else that you need in order to produce the food that the animals are going to consume, in order for them to be large enough to justify their sale. But it doesn't stop there. I want to take us back to a special report from our business correspondent, Abi Owolawi. This was about 9 months ago. This is another subset of agriculture, tannery, leather goods. Here she is in a market in Lagos talking about locally made leather goods versus foreign.
Here at the Mushin Main Market in Lagos, there's a wide array of both local and foreign leather materials. And I'm here to talk to some of the merchants about their price points and what influences the choices that the consumers make.
You can use this one for bags and shoe for ladies.
Nonya Onyenkwe has been in the foreign leather sales business for about 10 years now. She appears convinced that foreign leather is way better than local.
This one is, they call it a pair. With the foreign and the Nigerian leather, they are not the same quality.
So which one is the better quality?
The better quality is the foreign one.
So there's no Nigerian leather that is good.
No, it's good. Some people are using it, but they're requesting the foreign leather more than the Nigerian one.
So which one is more expensive?
The local one is more expensive than this one because it's not that much. People are not bringing it much. This one, you can see it anywhere, but that local one is few people that are selling it.
So it's more expensive even though people are demanding more of the foreign one?
Yes.
We call this per square foot.
Okay.
Leather trader Ben Anazodo couldn't agree more.
Some of the countries we get it from is Italy, Spain, and Brazil. You can't believe it. The local ones are more expensive. Yes, they are more expensive than the foreign. Of course, I don't know why it is so. It's very funny, but they are more expensive than the foreign. And the foreign ones are more durable than the local ones.
Now, Abby, of course, she went up north to Kano to go and look at the industries there, the tannery industry. So again, just to stress this point, the needle has not moved over the period of time in terms of developing agriculture, despite the fact that agriculture is one of the 3 biggest contributors to GDP. I think it's about 24-25% and accounts for a large amount of farmers, even though most of them are subsistence farmers that are mostly poor and farming just to feed themselves. So again, from animal feed to the different subsectors of agriculture, we are still growing at less than 3%. The improvements have not been there despite all the promises that have been made to improve. So now it is, again, we're repeating the same thing we do every 4-8 years. It is up to the next administration to improve this sector, and then we'll be... Anyway, Kingsley Moghalu, who of course former deputy governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, was pushing back against the IMF's call for higher taxes. This is, of course, spring meetings in Washington, D.C. with the World Bank. The IMF was saying that Nigeria should increase tax. Now, tax to GDP in Nigeria is in single digits, 7-8%. But he pushed back saying, no, you need to improve tax collection. I know taxes is one of Doctor's favorite topics. So here's some tweets from Kingsley Moghalu. I disagree with the IMF call on Nigeria's government to increase taxes. That will not solve our economic crisis. What we need is more efficient and more widespread tax collection. Millions who should pay taxes don't. Then we need to spend better, curb waste and corruption. He continues, and Doctor, I think this one is for you. He said we need to spend more on things that yield economic dividends, and then we need to consider a wealth tax for big men like Doctor, where the extremely wealthy pay their fair share, as is the case in developed countries. Finally, we should end the regime of waivers that give wealthy business trillions in tax breaks. We have a lot of tax waivers. Are we benefiting? We have tax collection, revenue generation, and revenue allocation spending problems, not tax increase problems. Of course, many avoid paying taxes because they simply don't trust government. Trust must be restored in a verifiable manner in increased transparency. And then finally, in South Africa, this isn't really a business story, but Ramaphosa has signed into law allowing individuals in South Africa not linked to a political party to run for office. Can you imagine what that would mean, where you can just run for office and you don't have to be linked to a political party? That's our updates for Africa.
Well, thank you very much, Reuters, for your update. A number of things to say, but let me start off with, I saw Kingsley Moghalu's tweet yesterday. I actually screen grabbed it. I was going to have a conversation with him this morning. Totally agree with him. And this is why sometimes not sometimes, it is important for Africa to deal with its own issues. And when we hear some recommendations from IMF or the World Bank, it comes with a pinch of salt, because understanding the climate, because I don't know where they got their, the basis of their recommendation from in terms of increasing taxes. What we keep talking about in Nigeria is that we need to widen the tax net. Not enough people are paying taxes. We can certainly do more. I know agencies like LIRS, FIRS are doing initiatives, working with even organizations to increase that, but it is not yet we still have a big issue around being able to tax more people and then tax the rich. Doctor needs to be paying more tax. Doctor and I cannot be paying the same percentage of tax. It is
more taxes.
It is not right. It is absolutely not right. I mean, for want of time, I'll move on. But the other thing I was going to talk about was cost of production. When we look at it was heartbreaking to watch that documentary with regards to the Nigerian leather and the untapped potential in that regard. And why would it be more expensive, even though the quality, as they say, isn't as good as the foreign ones? It's because the cost of production is ridiculous. Yeah. There numbers to show that the manufacturing sector has contracted in the last few years because of the rising cost of production. That has to be looked into.
Okay, let's take the issues one after the other. Let's start with South Africa. In 2020, the Constitutional Court in South Africa actually said you could not run for political office, particularly the presidency, if you were not a member of a political party. So what has happened in that country now with President Ramaphosa signing into law a bill that now has become law that says you can be president without being a member of a political party? I think it's a major development. But it seems to me that you brought that story because you are thinking of, can we learn a lesson
of course.
from the South African example?
Yes.
Because there are many people in Nigeria who are also arguing for independent candidacy. It was one of those clauses during the last constitutional amendment process that did not go through. And there are many Nigerians who are still saying, look, I don't have to be a member of a political party to be a candidate. But we'll see how it works out in South Africa. Their next general election is in 2024.
Oh, yes.
But the big concern is, well, should I say the lack of popularity of the ANC,
yes.
the African National Congress. With the crisis, with the energy sector, outage, consistent outage, crisis within the economy, and all of that. Maybe this could be, to use a popular Nigerian phrase, a game changer next year. You started the story with agriculture, animal field. Well, I don't think I listened to you too well because animal feed?
Yes.
We are talking about human feed in Nigeria. Human beings have not even eaten this morning. You are talking about animal feed.
That's my choice, not my circumstance.
Look, US, I said the US, the World Bank, is it the IMF? They just did a poverty outlook on Nigeria.
Yes.
And they are saying that Nigeria, in fact, spends over 90% of revenue on debt service.
Yes, yes.
And that the situation is going to get worse.
Yes.
That more Nigerians, over 13 million additional Nigerians are going to go below the poverty line within the next 5 years. And that with population growing at a rate higher than poverty reduction rate in Nigeria, that Nigeria faces dire straits. So we are all looking forward to what you may call Tinubunomics. So Tinubunomics,
yes.
How will it deal with that challenge? So before you think of animals, think about us first. Let us worry about our stomach, finally, on tax.
Yes.
I think as Professor Akintenewa says regularly on this program, Kingsley Moghalu cannot be more correct. The issues he raised, tax waivers, are heavily abused. Increasing tax. If you increase taxation, that could be an issue. It could discourage investment. Okay, that's just the basic economics 101.
Yeah.
So you have to worry about striking a balance. 3, he talked about trust and tax administration. Nigerians don't trust their government to manage tax well. So if they pay the tax, what would they do with it? They will probably acquire, more aids. There are some governors in this country who have over 100 special assistants.
Indeed.
They will probably go on a spending spree on jamboree and all of that. So what is the residual point that we can take? It's about expanding the tax base. The people who are not in the tax base and getting all the rich people who get tax waivers to at least behave like citizens.
Yes.
The emphasis is on civic responsibility.
Indeed.
But many recommendations have come from the international community, including removing trade barriers and all of that. But what Nigeria needs going forward is to address all these key economic issues for the betterment of people like us. I see you looking too. You also want better life. And I'm sure Mr. K and Rutus, you both also want better life.
Yes. Well, I understand we don't have a lot of time, so we have to go. But just let me mention this. Emerging Africa, how the global economy's last frontier can prosper and matter. A book by Professor Kingsley Moghalu is a must-read for every politician and for every Nigerian. It helps us to understand where the issues are with regards to our economy. And the second point I would want to raise, Rotus, is on the animal feed. Though Ruben might say that we need more feed for our tummy first, but I will say the animal feed is the core, is what will guarantee that there will be food on the table.
Yeah.
My sister runs a farm, and with that farm, it's the cost of production of the feed is what makes it impossible for the food to be readily available for those who need it. So we have to sort this out. But Rotus, this is conversation that you and I will continue to have for a while. So
just for clarification purposes, I'm not against animal rights. Animals should also eat.
They should eat.
Human beings
They should eat as well.